because we read 3 chapters of the Book of Kings for the first Book of Kings, Melachim, it's called. Now, it's interesting. In the text, you'll see a number of times it mentions that you can get more information about these people if you go to a book called the Annals of the Kings, which is not Melachim, which is not our Book of Kings, but there may have been another Book of Kings that we don't know about that has more information about these various characters. So we started at chapter 17, where we were just introduced to this fellow, Eliyahu HaTishbi, right? He comes from Gilad. He's called Hagiladi, and he's called to confront Ahab, right? That's how the story begins. He went through a number of tales. One of them was the tale of, if you recall, the ravens, where he has to hide from the king, hides in a cave, and the ravens bring food to him, and he has a little spring, a nachal, that wadi, and he's able to drink and survive until Ahab cools down. Then we went to another story where he and they're pretty interesting how these stories have their own beginning, middles, and end. They're quite, as I say, highly stylized. They've been said probably orally many years, and then got written down. And then the second story, if you recall, was the one where he's also going to a woman who lost her husband. He's looking for a room to stay along the way, and her child gets ill, and he sort of cures the child. So we have this power that he has to cure the child. Then we had a third story, which is probably one of the more interesting ones, and the ones that you know about, is that he challenges Ahab by saying, let your
Pass me the yellow slip again from the book.
let those who are serving Baal. Baal is the major Canaanite
Not in the book.
god, Baal. And Baal is a phallic symbol. I mean, we're all over 18 here. I can talk about this kind of stuff. Okay. It's phallic. Okay. So that's El, and Baal. And Baal literally means to fornicate, but it also be the master of. So you master a person by it, right? The Baal was a major worship, and all of these obelisks or things that we see are as obviously the Washington Monument is trying to prove something. But okay, I don't want to get involved with that, with a little bit of monument envy tonight. But whatever. But the prophets of Baal are the Har Carmel. That's where Eliyahu hangs out, on Har Carmel. You can actually go to the supposed place where this confrontation took place, called Mukuraka, and there's a little church there dedicated to Elijah, and it has a beautiful deck where you can see all of the north of Israel. Beautiful place. And he invites for this confrontation the 400 prophets of Baal, and he is by himself. And he says, "Okay, let's see who's really God." And they take animals, they cut them up, they put them on the altar in order to offer them up. And he says, "Wait, before we start, I just want to give you a little drama." He says, they don't know. He's very dramatic. He says, "Okay, whoever brings down fire to take up these offerings will know that they're on the right side of God. And on mine, I'll show you what I'm going to do." He takes water and he sprays water over everything. He builds a canal around it with water on it because he wants to make it extra special, right? It's wet. It's even wet. I'm making it tougher for God, if you will. And of course, the story is, of course, that the offering of Elijah is taken. Fire comes down. The others is not. And then, as many of these stories end, as you will see, he slaughters all these other people. Now, if that really happened or not, I don't know. But there's a lot of slaughtering going on in these books. There's a lot of war. There's a lot of slaughtering. There's a lot of killing. And it seems to be, I hate to use the word, but it seemed to be de rigueur. It was not an uncommon thing that people would be put into harm's way. So today we're going to continue reading some text. Now, how many people were disturbed that we read Hebrew as well as English and want to just do the English? So raise your hand if you were disturbed by reading of the Hebrew. I got 2, no disturbed. Rick wasn't here, so he doesn't know if he's disturbed yet, but he might get disturbed. Who else is saying what just that? Susan's just, Shayna, you had a problem with reading the Hebrew? I mean, you didn't have to read it, but I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
You're muted.
You're muted, Shayna. Yeah.
No, it's not that. It's just that it takes the whole class to read the story in 2
Yeah,
languages.
it takes longer. Okay. Oh, it takes a little longer. Okay.
And
Betsy,
then,
same
and then
thing.
we don't, and then we
All
don't
right.
hear you.
Okay, so let's then maybe tonight decide to do the English, okay?
Oh, okay.
And we'll get through it a little faster. But we're going to read quite a bit of interesting stuff, and some of it you really know from other contexts, but you may not know them in the context. So we finished chapter 20, and now we're going down to chapter 21, I believe. Let me see if I can get there. 21. Here we are. So let's just go back a little bit to 20, just to refresh us, because the way it opens up, 21 opens up after these events happened. Okay, so let's remind ourselves of what happened. To go back to 20, he is in.
Rav Tiferet,
Yes, he's basically saying the prophet approaches the king of Israel, said to him, "Go up for your efforts." He basically, at this point, what's happening is the man of God came to Melech Yisrael, V'yomer, and he said to him, "Thus said the Lord, because the Arameans have said the Lord is a God of mountains; he is not a God of lowlands. I will deliver the great host onto your hands." And it goes on basically that these prophets at the time seem to be counselors of war as well, and they have a certain function. And it ends up by him saying, at the end, he makes a prophecy about the battle and who will win and who will lose. And Yehoshaphat, who is the king of Judah. So it's often we see in this text that often when things were going a little bit weird, a king of Israel would go down to a king of Judah and say, "Would you be willing to be my ally in a certain war that I'm playing?" Now, a lot of these wars are what we would call border skirmishes. They're always these little municipalities or principalities, however you want to call them, and there's always some uprising somewhere, somebody trying to grab this piece of land, that piece of land. It's like what goes on in Kashmir, you know, the Indians are trying to get that piece, and the Pakistanis that piece. There's always little things that are going on in that. It's a very unsettled area of the world.
May
So
I
in
ask a
chapter
question?
20, yes, please.
Did you permit questions in the class? Because I missed it.
Usually I give you a break and then we have questions. First we read,
Okay, so I'll wait.
because without reading, we don't know what we're
Yes.
talking about. Okay.
Okay,
So
I'll wait.
after these things happened, the following events occurred. And if you'd like to read, please just unmute and read. Just don't jump in. Verse 1, chapter 21. Go ahead. Anybody? Just the English. Not all at once.
Events occurred sometime afterward. Naboth the Jezreelite owned a vineyard in
We
Jezreel,
can't hear you well. All right.
adjoining the palace of King Ahab of Samaria.
Okay. So Navot, the Israelite, owned a vineyard. The reason we're reading this is because it gives us a little bit of insight into who Achav or Ahab was. Let's read next one. Verse 2.
Ahab said to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard so that I may have it as a vegetable garden, since it is right next to my palace. I will give you a better vineyard in exchange, or if you prefer, I will pay you the price in the money. I will pay you the price in money."
Verse 3.
But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give it up to you, what I've inherited from my fathers."
Oh, so what does Ahab do?
Ahab went home dispirited and sullen because of the answer that Naboth the
Jezreelite had given him. I will not give up to you what I've inherited from my fathers. He lay down on his bed and turned away his face, and he would not eat.
Okay, so Ahab is depressed. Okay,
Right.
he's depressed. So what does his wife do?
His wife, Jezebel, came to him and asked him, why are you dispirited that you won't eat?
Okay. Now, by the way, Izebel in Hebrew, Izebel, this may have been a name given to her. Izebel means literally a place of refuse. Zevel is garbage in the modern Hebrew.
So
She's not seen as a very positive character. So whatever.
Right.
Okay. So he told her, what did he say? Verse 5.
So he told her, I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and proposed to him, sell me your vineyard for money, or if you prefer, I'll give you another vineyard in exchange. But he answered, I will not give my vineyard to you.
What does Jezebel say?
now is the time to show yourself king over Israel. Rise and eat something and be cheerful. I will get the vineyard of Naboth and Jezreelite for you.
So what did you do?
So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal and sent the letters to the elders and the nobles who lived in the same town with Naboth.
And what did she write?
Letters she wrote as follows: proclaim a fast and seat Naboth at the front of the assembly.
Okay, and then what?
And seat 2 scoundrels opposite him, and let them testify against him. You have reviled God and king. Then take him out and stone him to death.
Oh my.
Wow, that's one way of dealing with it.
It's
Now, this idea of 2, you have to have 2. The Talmud talks a lot about that. That in Jewish practice, you can't bring anybody to an indictment even or to a trial without 2 witnesses. But the witnesses have to be obviously witnesses who are telling the truth. In this case, they're not telling the truth. So what do?
His townsmen, the elders and the nobles who lived in this town, did as Jezebel had instructed them, just as was written in the letters that she had sent them.
So what do?
They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth at the front of the assembly.
And then it's like it's a repetition we're getting here. Yes, go ahead.
Then the two scoundrels came and sat down opposite him, and the scoundrels testified against Naboth publicly as follows: Naboth has reviled God and king. Then they took him outside the town and stoned him to death.
And then what was happening? Word was what?
Word was sent to Jezebel. Naboth has been stoned to death.
As soon as what?
As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she jumped up and down.
Right.
Go
this
and
is
take
Ken's version of the Bible. Yes.
my midrash. Yeah. Go and take possession of the vineyard which Naboth the Jezreelite refused to sell you for money, for Naboth is no longer alive; he is dead.
So when Ahab heard,
that Naboth was dead, Ahab set out for the vineyard of Naboth, the Jezreelite, to take possession of it.
aha, and now we get something.
And the word of the
Devar Adonai. What happens in verse 17?
Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite.
Right, and next he went, and what was he told to do?
Go down and confront King Ahab of Israel, who resides in Samaria. He is now in Naboth's vineyard. He has gone down there to take possession of it.
And what should he say to him? God said to Elijah.
Say to him, thus saith the Lord, would you murder and take possession? Thus said the Lord, in the very place where the dogs lapped up Naboth's blood, the dogs will lap up your blood too.
Okay, so basically he's asking Elijah to take a classic prophetic role of speaking truth to power. I wish he had done it before they killed the guy, but all right. All right. Ahab then said to Elijah,
So you have found me, my enemy. Yes, I have found you, he replied, because you have committed yourself to doing what is evil in the sight of the Lord.
And he goes on. Who'd like to read what he goes on?
I will
Verse
bring
21.
disaster upon you. I will make a clean sweep of you. I will cut off from Israel every male belonging to Ahab, and a bond and free.
Bond and free. And then what else is he going to do?
I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and the like of the house of Baasha, son of Ahijah, because of the provocation you have caused by leading Israel to sin.
Okay. And then what did the Lord say?
And the Lord has also spoken concerning Jezebel. The dogs shall devour Jezebel in the field of Jezreel.
Okay, so you have to understand, in order to have this kind of retribution, these guys have to really be shown that they are villains, okay? Right? Very much villain. Indeed.
All of Ahab's line who die in the town shall be devoured by dogs, and all who die in the open country shall be devoured by the birds of the sky.
Indeed. Go on.
Indeed, there never was anyone like Ahab who committed himself to doing what was displeasing to the Lord at the instigation of his wife Jezebel.
And then what happened? He did what? He acted?
He acted most abominably, straying after the fetishes, just like the Amorites, whom the Lord had dispossessed before the Israelites.
What did Ahab happen when he heard these words? What did he say?
When Ahab heard these words, he rent his clothes and put sackcloth on his body. He fasted and lay in sackcloth and walked about subdued.
So he took seriously this admonition, and he's doing an act of contrition, okay? An act of contrition. And then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Let's go to verse 29.
Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his lifetime. I will bring the disaster upon his house in his son's time. Oh, that's good.
Okay. Okay. So okay, it's time is time. And it's better, I guess, not to have it. So what we get is a very interesting little thing here. Okay, you get the interesting about that he's admonished, and guess what? He goes through an act of tshuva, which is kind of interesting. Now, is he doing this because the admonition was so horrible that he tried to do whatever he could to, mitigate it or not? But whatever it is, was he acting faithfully? Was he doing it with good faith, with bad faith? We don't know. But it was taken that he himself would not be punished, but that the disasters will come upon his sons. So what happens? Chapter 22, verse 1.
There was
Somebody who has not read yet, please.
There was a lull of 3 years with no war between Aram and Israel.
Remarkable. And then in the third year?
In the third year, King Jehoshaphat of Judah came to visit the king of Israel.
By the way, that's a great name for a kid. If you ever have a kid, Jehoshaphat, it means God is my judge, right? Jehoshaphat, Shofet, right? Okay, it's a good name. And the king of Israel said,
You know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us, and yet we do nothing to recover it from the hands of the king of Aram.
Right. Now, what is interesting here is that we don't know if this is Ahab or not. You notice that? It doesn't say, right?
Kings of Israel.
He just says that the king of Israel spoke, right? V'yomer El Yehoshaphat, would you go to war with me against that? And he said to him, will you come with me to where? Where does he want him to go? And he said,
Ramoth Gilead.
Right. He answered the king.
Yehoshaphat answered the king of Israel, I will do what you do. My troops shall be your troops. My horses shall be your horses.
Very interesting. Yomer. And then Yehoshaphat said further.
Please, go ahead.
Go ahead.
He said further to the king of Israel, please first inquire of the Lord.
Aha. Let's see if we can get a consultation here to see again what the prophets will say. So what does the king of Israel do?
So the king of Israel gathered the prophets, about 400 men, and asked them, shall I march upon Ramoth Gilead for battle, or shall I not? March, they said, and the Lord will deliver it into your majesty's hands.
Now, what is interesting is that if you're a king, particularly a authoritarian one, which they all are, these 400 prophets, and the number 400 may be just a sort of a made-up number, but the bottom line, all of them, they really are there not to these particular prophets, as we saw earlier in Elijah's confrontation with them, they're yes men. They say whatever you say. They're not really there to tell them not to go to war. They're saying, don't worry, go to war. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So, and the king of Israel answered, oh no, then Yehoshaphat said, because Yehoshaphat knows that these prophets are all yes men. So in verse 7, what does he ask?
Is there another prophet of the Lord here through whom we can inquire?
Right. So he doesn't trust these guys. Let's get another prophet. Let's find someone else. Okay. And the king of Israel answered,
Jehoshaphat, there is one more man through whom we can inquire of the Lord, but I hate him because he never prophesies anything good for me, but only misfortune. Micaiah, the son of Imlah. But King Yehoshaphat said, don't say that, your majesty.
So what happened? Verse 9.
Oh, the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, bring Micaiah, son of Imlah, at once.
Right. And then the king of Israel.
The king of Israel and King Yehoshaphat of Judah were seated on their thrones, arrayed in their robes on the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were prophesying before them.
And then Zedekiah, son of Hanan, says what?
Kenana? Oh.
Maybe his last name was Hora. Kenana Hora. No, that's not his name.
Kenana Hora?
No, it's not his name. That's just an inside joke for those. Okay. Enough for this frivolity. People think we're having a good time.
A good time.
So, what is Zedekiah, son of Kenana, has provided?
Son of Canaan has provided himself with iron horns. And he said, thus said the Lord, with these you shall gore the Arameans till you make an end of them.
Okay, so this prophet Zedekiah is also a pretty aggressive guy. Okay, and now verse 12.
Oh my God.
All the other prophets were prophesying similarly. March upon Ramoth Gilead and triumph, and the Lord will deliver it into your majesty's hands.
Okay, and then a messenger
who had gone to summon Micaiah.
Wait, somebody who hasn't read? Anybody who has not read would like to read?
The messenger who had gone to summon Micaiah said to him, look, the words of the prophets are with one accord favorable to the king. Let your word be like that of the rest of them. Speak a favorable word.
Okay. As the Lord lives.
Micaiah answered, I will speak only, I'm sorry, my letters are very small. I will speak only what the Lord tells me.
Okay, so here we have the first guy, Zedekiah, right? Tzidkiyahu, who's saying, go for it. I'll give you iron horns. You can gore them and kill them. It's great. But they also said for this guy. And what does he say? I will speak only what the Lord tells me, right? He's not there going to be a yes man for the king. So what does he say when he came?
When he came before the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we march upon Ramoth Gilead for battle, or shall we not? He answered him, march and triumph. The
Okay.
Lord will deliver it into your majesty's hands.
Okay, so he also agrees. And then the king said to him,
How many times must I
Go ahead.
okay,
how many times must I adjure you to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?
and then he said,
I
So
saw
all
all
Israel-
Israel scattered over the hills like sheep without a shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let everyone return to his home in safety.
and then the king of Israel says what?
Didn't I tell you, said the king of Israel to Jehoshaphat, that he would not prophesy good fortune for me, but only misfortune?
All right, so we get a mixed message here. On the one hand, he says it's going to be delivered in your hands. And then he has the second message of this image that it's going to be a sort of a chaotic kind of place. There's not going to be any shepherd. There will be some level of chaos that will ensue. Didn't I tell you? And then what does Micaiah say in verse 19?
Oh.
I will call upon you to hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord seated upon his throne with all the host of heavens standing in attendance to the right and to the left of him.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we only get visions like that from two people, from Isaiah and from Ezekiel, but not from this fellow who would tell you the truth I never heard of until I read this.
Micaiah?
Right.
Oh.
Micaiah did not have a lot of good press. He didn't get a book or anything. Neither did Elijah, in a sense. There's no Sefer Eliyahu, etc. So what happened? Until a certain spirit came forward.
The Lord?
Verse 21.
21.
No, 20.
Until a certain spirit
20.
came forward and
Oh.
stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him.
Hmm.
How? The Lord asked him.
This is remarkable, right? Right? The Lord does not know.
What?
Pay attention for a minute, right? He's saying, he says, tell me what's going to happen, right? How? I mean, when the Lord
How
doesn't
the
know,
Lord
on,
is-
I reply. I'm going
Ooh.
to bring it down one more. Yeah.
Wait.
Verse 22.
I
And
will
he
go
replied,
out. I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. Then he said, you will entice and you will prevail. Go out and do it.
okay, so what happens? So the
The
Lord,
Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets of yours, for the Lord has decreed disaster upon you.
okay, so Micaiah says, look, I had a vision, and the vision was that all of these prophets think they're getting the truth from their prophecies, but the thing is, it is God who has put a lying spirit in them. So what they're telling you is all a lie. You will not necessarily be victorious. So we go on to verse 24. And this is interesting.
Right.
This is the first guy that we talked about earlier, Tzidkiyahu, right? The son of Kenaanah. And what does he do?
He stepped up and struck Micaiah on the cheek and demanded, which way did the Spirit of the Lord pass from me to speak with you?
Okay, so we get a little bit of a quarrel between two prophets, and not only that, but he hits him. It's pretty
Violence.
pretty dramatic. And then what does Micaiah say?
And Micaiah replied, you'll find out on the day when you try to hide in the innermost room.
Right, meaning when you try to get away from me. And then then the king of Israel said,
Then the king of Israel said, take Micaiah and turn him over to Ammon, the city's governor, and to Prince Joash.
And then what happens? And what do they say when they turn him over?
King's orders are, put this fellow in prison and let his fate be scant bread. Let his fare be scant bread and scant water until I come home safe.
To which Micaiah retorted,
Micaiah retorted, if you ever come home safe, the Lord has not spoken through me. He said further, listen, all you peoples.
So what happens?
So the king of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah marched upon Ramoth Gilead.
Right. And the king of Israel says,
The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, disguise yourself and go into battle, but you wear your robes. So the king of Israel went into the battle disguised.
Okay. And then the king of Aram.
King of Aram had instructed his 32 chariot, his
That's right.
chariot officers.
Right.
Don't attack anyone, small or great, except the king of Israel.
Wait a minute, I'm missing something.
Made it a little bit bigger. I hope that helps.
Toda.
Wait. Oh,
Okay.
Okay, so here's the thing. The king of Israel says to Jehoshaphat, disguise yourself and go into battle. You wear your robes. Okay? So the king of Israel went into the battle disguised. Okay, what do we have going here? We have a little bit of small time treachery here. Because the king of Aram said to his 32 chariot officers, don't attack anyone except the king of Israel. Now, how he's going to know who's the king of Israel?
oh,
The only king he will see is who?
The disguised one.
Is Jehoshaphat, right? Because he's going in disguise. So they saw Jehoshaphat, go on.
Whom they took for the king of Israel. They turned upon him to attack him, and Jephthah
where are we?
cried out.
And Jehoshaphat cried out. And then when the chariot officers, when they realized that he had the wrong guy, what happens?
Turn back from pursuing him.
They turned back from pursuing him, and then
Then a man drew his bow at random and hit the king of Israel between the plates of the armor. And he said to his charioteer, turn the horses around and get me behind the lines. I'm wounded.
Okay. And then what
The
happened?
battle raged all day long, and the king remained propped up in the chariot facing Aram. The blood from the wound ran down into the hollow of the chariot, and at dusk he died.
Ooh.
All right. So I guess he shouldn't have gone into battle. All right. Whatever. Verse 36.
As the sun was going down, a shout went through the army, every man to his own town, every man to his own district.
Meaning, let's retreat.
Go home.
And the king was happened.
So the king died and was brought to Samaria. They buried the king in Samaria.
And then what did they do?
They flushed out the chariot at the pool of Samaria. Thus the dogs lapped up his blood, and the horse bathed in it in accordance with the word that the Lord had spoken.
Okay, so we can assume that
This is a brutal one.
we're talking about either this is still Ahab, or is this the punishment being given to his son? If you remember, I won't do it to you, but you will lose your son. The son is not given a name. He's only being called the king of Israel. Now we get other events, verse 39.
Weird.
29.
The other events of Ahab's reign and all his actions, the ivory palace that he built and all the towns that he fortified, are all recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel.
That's the annals that we don't have. So there is some book, right, with the annals of the kings of Israel. I'm not sure what that is. And then what happens in verse 40?
Ahab dies. Ahab slept with his fathers, and his son Ahaziah succeeded him as king.
Okay. So it's a little bit unclear if it's clear that Ahab is not the one who was killed because he dies in bed, right? And it's unclear if Ahaziah is the one we're talking about or not. That's very unclear because there's no name given. But we do know that Ahaziah, he who holds on to God, who grasps God, Ahaziah, will succeed him as king. And then we get to, I think, verse
41.
Moshe, could you stop for a second? You said that Ahab died in his bed, therefore he wasn't killed, but I thought he went back from the battle and died.
Yeah,
that's what I thought. It's very ambiguous. It's very ambiguous here.
Really?
Whether or not, because in order to fulfill the prophecy, he was not going to be killed in battle. He did his act of contrition to a certain degree, and he said, yes, but but it may not happen to you, but it's going to happen to your son. So it's really unclear. Since there was no name given, it doesn't say Ahab went into battle. It says the king of Israel went into battle. Is that king of Israel Ahab? Or has Ahab done contrition and sort of abdicated his role to it? And there's another person who's the king of Israel, another son of his, or not? It's unclear from this text. However, it does say that when he dies, he is succeeded by this fellow Achaziahu, Beno Tachtav, and this fellow we know is not the one that's killed in battle. So it's really very ambiguous. The antecedents are very weird. We don't know who they're really talking about. But we do know one thing, that the prophets were lying to him when they said, don't worry, it's going to be fine. You're going to come out victorious. And we heard from one of the prophets that the reason this is the case is because it was brought before God, and God basically was cooperated with this prophet and said, okay, let's put all the prophecies that have been given about victory and make them into a lie. Verse 42.
Still, the question is, where's Elijah then? Where's
Wait a second. We're getting Elijah's. This is the context for Elijah. Don't worry. In the last chapter, Elijah shows up at the end. We'll see what happens. Nobody read ahead, I hope. Okay.
Can I ask a question of something that happened way before? I mean, there's a conversion that goes on between. Is that what goes on? I mean, there's a quote that we usually associate between Ruth and Naomi. Wherever you go, I will go.
Yeah.
Okay, this is more of a military alliance. Wherever your troops go, my troops will go. Wherever your horses go, my horses will go. I don't think it's the same necessary relationship that Ruth and Naomi had. It's a very different kind of relationship. This is a military kind of alliance. And with Ruth and Naomi, it's a much more intimate kind of statement. But you're saying it sounds the same to you.
Well, is it which came first in Ruth and Naomi, or
if I only knew? Probably Ruth came after, but I can in no way think there was influenced by this.
There's no okay. It's
no, it's just just a phrase, a phrase that you would hope to hear in a military alliance, right? My troops are your troops, and my horses are your horses. That would really be the right thing to hear if you're making an alliance. But I don't think one influenced the other.
Okay.
Now you may find that's not the case, but I'm sure it is the case. Okay, 42.
Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 25 years. His mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Shilhi.
Shilhi, right. Now this is the reason I want to read a little of this. This is so interesting that a king is given, we know about him with his mother's name. That's very rare, right? Why don't we know his father's name? Well, we know his mother's name. It's very fascinating. But we know his father because he's mentioned next sentence. But it was very interesting that he identifies himself through his mother, Azuvah, the daughter of Shilhi. Very interesting. So then on verse 43, what do we know about Jehoshaphat? He followed what?
Closely the course of his father Asa, and did not deviate from it, doing what was pleasing to the Lord.
But, however, there's always a big however or a but. Verse 44.
The shrines did not cease to function. The people still sacrificed and offered at the shrines.
And then what happens?
And further, Jehoshaphat submitted to the king of Israel.
All right. So his alliance goes even further than troops and horses. He takes on the rituals of the king of Israel. And then the other events are what?
Oh, they're in the book of the Annals of the King.
That's right. So we all know that he was the valor he displayed in battle, etc. Recorded in. Since we don't have that, there's room for a wonderful novel for any of you who like historical novels to write a novel called Annals of the Kings of Judah. Keep you busy during the lockdown. Okay.
Is that really
And what
a
else did he
novel,
do?
Reverend?
He also
Sorry?
stamped out the remaining male prostitutes. Wow.
Oh,
Survived in the
oh,
land from the time of his father Asa.
So here's
oh.
interesting. He takes on the rituals, but he stamps out the male prostitutes. It's kind of interesting. Remember, a lot of the pagan worship had to do around sexual practices. That was a very common idea. That in the sexual practice you were creating sort of a holy environment. Okay, he stamped out. And then it says, Umelech ein be'edom, there was no king.
In Edom.
Edom, a viceroy acted as king. So Edom all of a sudden comes in. And a lot of this is like, you don't get a sense that this has a real narrative. It keeps going back and forth, a little line here, a little line there. But then let's see what Achaziah has to say. Let's see what Jehoshaphat did as well in verse 49.
Jehoshaphat constructed Tarshish ships to sail to Ophir for gold, but he did not sail because the ships were wrecked at Etzion Geber.
Okay, and then Achaziah proposed what?
He proposed to Jehoshaphat, let my servants sail on the ships with your servants. But Jehoshaphat would not agree. But I thought the ships were just wrecked.
Right, but this is obviously he's saying this is exactly. I'm saying this is not in a very good narrative form. This sentence obviously should have been before, when he was going out on the mission. I want my people to share in the bounty that you're going for, in the gold. So it's a little bit sort of telling you beforehand what the result is going to be, and then goes back and brings the king of Israel, Achaziah, saying that. So what happens in 51?
Wait, Achaziah says.
Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of his father David. His father
Right.
David.
And his son
Jehoram succeeded him as king.
Jehoram.
I have to ask a quick question. In the two verses
can you read the next sentence first before you do that?
Meanwhile, Ahaziah, son of Ahab, had become king of Israel in Samaria in the 17th year of King Jehoshaphat of Judah. Oh, I see. He reigned over Israel 2 years. Now I understand.
Now, 2 years is not a long time. So he did not do very well. So this is just an interlude. Now we're going to the second book of Kings. I know it's your favorite book, and we're going to go there in a second. I'm just going to find this again. Second book of Kings. Let's see. Kings 2.
I have to.
Hold on a second.
No. That's it. No.
Okay, now let's have to get back to the beginning again. Hold on. I'll get us to Kings 2. Kings 2. Kings 2, where are you? Kings 2. No, hold on. I'll find it. It's here. I know we have Kings 1. We definitely have Kings 2. So let me just, if I have to look for it again. Hold on. Hold on.
You could also do a search.
Yeah, I'm just got to get to the Safari again. Hold on one second.
I mean, you could just
We're in Safari.
Search bar.
Let me just do it again. That's all. Hold on one second, folks. Okay.
The suspense is killing us.
Yeah. What's going to happen? I don't know. Okay. So I'm going back. Bear with me. Here we go. Tanakh. This is how this works. It's a terrific thing. The Safari Library. Look at what it has in it. Tanakh, Mishnah, Talmud, Midrash, Kabbalah. It's really a tremendous thing. And then we go down to Kings 2.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now we're going to get to our main character again. Okay. Just wanted to give you a little bit of confusion. And confusion is always a wonderful beginning for enlightenment. So it's good. Okay, let's start. And I'll read the first one. After Ahab's death, Moab rebelled against Israel. Who are the Moabites? The Moabites are descendants of Lot, supposedly, and they are the other side of the Dead Sea. Okay, so they are under the jurisdiction of Israel, but they rebel. So there's a war going on. And what happens? And this explains why Achaziah only served for 2 years. Who would like to read that? Verse 2.
Achaziah,
Go on.
Read, so somebody who has not read, if possible. Yeah.
Achaziah fell through the lattice in his upper chamber of Samaria and was injured. So he sent messengers whom he instructed, go inquire of Baal Zebub and God of Ekron, whether I shall recover from this injury.
All right. The Baal Zevuv is an interesting name. It's master of the fly.
Mm-hmm.
A Zevuv is a fly. Master
Lord
of the fly. And then we get later on in the New Testament, it becomes Beelzebub, which becomes sort of a another name for the Antichrist or Satan, Beelzebub. Terrific name for a kid as well, if you got some time. Okay, so
the kind of fly that landed on Pence's head during the debate, a plain old fly.
Your audio is very, very tough to hear, Evelyn. I can't hear you.
I know why, because I put my headset on. Is that better?
Much better.
Yeah, I just, is this plain old fly, like the little flying around fly?
No, Beelzebub is the name of a god. He's the god of Ekron.
What you said something about flies.
The word Zevuv means fly in Hebrew. Baal Zevuv would be the master of the fly. Now, the fly is pretty, you would think, pretty unintimidating, right? Right? You want to be the master of the fiery dragon, right? But the Zvuv also has something that a lot of things don't have, and that is there's a lot of them around. Very few fiery dragons. When it comes to flies, boy, there are a lot of flies. Whatever. What is this? Why is this a problem? Let's read on. Because Elijah is visited by what? Verse 3.
An angel.
But an angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, go and confront the messengers of the king of Samaria and say to them, is there no God in Israel that you go to inquire of Baal Zebub, the god of Ekron?
Okay. And notice it's an angel of the Lord talking to Elijah. That's not always what we've heard. What have we heard before? The Lord speaks to Elijah. This is an interesting thing. It's an intermediary now. It's an intermediary between the Lord and now we've encountered malachim before, right? Angels before, right? Where do we find the very famous intervention of an angel and not God himself? Yes, Betsy.
The sacrifice of Isaac.
That's right. At the end of that, an angel calls forth, right? So it's interesting how that sometimes is not consistent. It really is. So what does he say? Surely, thus said the Lord. So he's going to go and he's telling him why you couldn't go and inquire of a nice Israelite God. You had to go to the God Beelzebub. And then, thus said the Lord. Now, Elijah says, I'm speaking in the name of the Lord. What is he saying? Verse 4.
You shall not rise from the bed you are lying on, but you shall die. And Elijah went.
Okay, so it's rather brusque. He says, okay, you didn't ask the right God, you're going to die. And guess what? Why have you come back? So he leaves. And then what happens? The malachim, his messengers, return. And what do they say?
Why have you come back?
And then they answered him on verse 6.
A man came toward us and said to us, go back to the king who sent you and say to him, thus says the Lord, is there no God in Israel that you must send to inquire of Baal Zebub, the god of Ekron? Assuredly, you shall not rise from the bed you are lying on, but die.
And then he says, it goes on, because this, obviously, who is this man?
What sort of man was it, he asked them, who came toward you and said these things to you?
And now let's read on verse 8. We'll find out who it was. And this is going to help you a lot.
A hairy man, they replied, with a leather belt tied around his waist. Elijah the Tishbite.
Elijah the Tishbite was not known for his tonsorial grandeur. He's probably one of those guys who was like a Nazir, probably didn't drink wine or shave. In many traditions, we have these kinds of guys. You know, in India, they have the sadhus who never cut their hair and this and that. And he must have been a pretty, fierce sight to see. A guy who had, and he wore a belt around his waist, and he was probably wearing just a cloak, etc. That's Elijah the Tishbite. And then he sent to him. This is a very fascinating story.
A captain of 50 with his 50 men. He climbed up to him and found him sitting at the top of the hill. Man of God, he said to him, by order of the king, come down.
Wait.
Okay. Now this is just picture this. It's almost, I wouldn't say it's comical, but it has a certain comic feel to it, right? Here is this guy. He's telling them, go back. You shouldn't go visit this other god, and he's on top of a mountain. He's sitting on a hill. And Achaziah sends these guys to get him. And what happens? How does he reply? Verse 10.
Elijah replied to the captain of the 50, if I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you with your 50 men.
Boy.
Came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men.
All right, so we know right away this guy's got some connections. Verse 11.
The king then sent him to another captain with his 50 men, and he addressed him as follows: Man of God, by order of the king, come down at once.
And what did Elijah say? Verse 12.
He sent a third captain of 50.
Wait, no.
No, it's not there.
Elijah.
It's the verse we're doing, verse 12.
But Elijah answered him, if I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you with your 50 men. And fire of God came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men.
All right, this is the second group. Okay, now we get
100
to 13, the third group. Who'd like to read that? It's very, very familiar.
And
We
he
just read it.
sent a third captain of 50 with his 50 men. The third captain of 50 climbed to the top, knelt before Elijah, and implored him, saying, O man of God, please have regard for my life and the lives of these 50 servants of yours.
So it took until the third guy to figure out that Elijah means business. And verse 14.
Already fire has come from heaven and consumed the first two captains of 50 and their men. I beg you, have regard for my life.
And then in verse 15, what happened? I lost you.
Where is it?
Where is it? Yeah.
It's coming. Okay.
Then the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, go down with him. Do not be afraid of him. So he rose and went down with him to the king.
Okay. So he figured he's proven his strength. And then what happens? He said to him, hold on.
It's jumping around here.
Yeah, it's me.
Can't find it. Wait, we'll find it.
We're just there.
Wait,
There it is. Okay. Verse 15.
50?
15.
Then the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, go down with him.
Because you sent messengers to inquire.
So he rose and went
down
to the king.
What?
The king.
There's an echo.
Yes, I think two people are reading it once. Okay, 16.
He said to him, because you sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, as if there were no God in Israel whose word you could seek. Assuredly, you shall not rise from the bed you are lying on, but you shall die.
Then what happened?
And Ahaziah died according to the word of the Lord that Elisha had spoken. Jehoram succeeded him as king in the second year of King Jehoram, son of Yehoshaphat of Judah, for he had no son.
Okay, and the other events, so where can we find the other events of Ahaziah reign?
And this
Divrei
famous book,
Hayamim.
this famous book we don't have anymore.
We have two we don't have anymore. We have the Annals of the Kings of Judah and the Annals of the
Oh,
King
and the
of Israel.
Oh, right.
Right.
Okay.
So there's quite a few. If you remember that time I sent you this chart of these
Mm.
dynasties that go on, and there's
Mhm.
quite a bit of that. Okay. Just wanted to show a little bit of how Elijah is presented here.
Mm.
Sort of a magician, sort of a. It has a little feel in it. I don't know if you agree with me of him being sort of a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He has the power of, boom, he puts down his hand and you get this fire and it gets rid of 50 people at one time. Sort of what you expect of an arch villain and one of the superheroes. Now we get to the end probably of Elijah, but we'll do it slowly because
this is beautiful.
I'm going to miss him,
Yeah.
right? So we're in chapter 2, verse 1. ויהי בעלות אדוני אליהו בשרה שמיים וילך אליהו אלישע בן גילגל.
And the Lord was
I'd like
about
to read that.
take
Verse 1.
Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elijah and Elisha had set out from Gilgal.
Okay, now this Elisha just appears. He's very important because he will become the successor to Elijah.
Elijah, yeah,
And Elisha is worth studying as well. We're not going to do it, but I'll just read one little piece of Elisha because it's funny. Funny in a sad, macabre way, which is what I like. But it's God was about to take him up to heaven in a whirlwind. Interesting. Now remember back we read last week, he was on the mountain. Remember that? He was on Mount Sinai, Mount Chorev, right?
Yes.
And he was doing sort of the Moses thing, right?
Mhm.
And he hears a whirlwind. But in the
God
midst
is
of
not
it,
in the whirlwind. Yeah.
But in the midst of it, he hears the still small voice. Remember
Voice,
that?
yeah.
But here the whirlwind is coming to do something else. It's to bring him to heaven. It doesn't say, and this is very important for all of the stories of Elijah since then, it's very important to remember, it doesn't say, as you will see, that he dies.
Right.
Okay, let's keep that in mind. Okay.
So cool.
Not too far in the back of the mind, just keep it in the forefront. Okay.
Yeah, but
Eliyahu. So what does Eliyahu say? Verse 2.
Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to Bethel. As the Lord lives, as you live," said Elisha, "I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel.
Now we have no understanding of Elijah being a married person or not a married person. I doubt it. He was a very kind of strange guy, you can imagine. But he has this successor, Elisha, who becomes his major successor. And then what do? Disciples
of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that the Lord will take your master away from you today?" He replied, "I know it too. Be silent."
Don't bring it up. Don't bring it up. Right? And then verse 4, Elijah said to him,
Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to Jericho. As the Lord lives and as you live, said Elisha, I will not leave you. So they went on to Jericho.
So we're getting this idea of the closeness of the two. And then on verse 5.
The disciples of the prophets who were at Jericho came over to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that the Lord will take your master away from you today?" He replied, "I know it too. Be silent."
And then Elijah said to him,
"Stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to the Jordan. As the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you," he said. And the two of them went on.
Now, this is reminiscent of the Ruth story a little bit.
Yes, yeah, more.
It's much more intimate. It's nothing to do with any outside alliances. It has to do with their relationship. That he wants them to stay, he wants to go, but he says, no, wherever you go, I will go. So then he goes on in verse 7. I'm going to bring it to you right now.
50 men of the disciples of the prophets followed and stood by at a distance from them as the two of them stopped at the Jordan.
Okay, he's stopping at the Jordan. Now, this is interesting. Who'd like to read 8?
Thereupon Elijah took his mantle, and rolling it up, he struck the water. It divided to the right and the left, so that the two of them crossed over on dry land.
Wow.
Oh,
Sounds familiar.
Oh,
It's not the Reed Sea, it's the Jordan, and there are parts of the Jordan where you don't have to have it go from left to right. It's you can walk across. It's pretty narrow and not very deep. But we get again this is another Moses characteristic. Okay, another Moses characteristic, and the waters split and they go on dry land. And then verse 9, as they were crossing, I don't know how they had a chance to even talk. It's a very short walk across the Jordan, but whatever. As they were crossing,
As they were crossing, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I do for you what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha answered, "Let a double portion of your spirit pass on to me."
Oh, that's interesting.
wow,
very
that's
nice.
great.
That's a nice thing to ask for, right? Rather than can I have your gold watch? Okay, verse 10. He's a prophet. He didn't need a watch. He knew what time it was all about.
You have asked a difficult thing, he said. If you see me as I am being taken from you, this will be granted to you. If not, you will not.
Okay. And guess what goes on now? It has a sort of it has right here a little bit of a sort of a Zen Buddhist kind of idea of the two, right? The disciple and the master, and they're going on a journey, and there's all kinds of stuff going on between them. Very common kind of tales in Zen and Buddhist tales. Okay, so what happens?
As
They kept walking.
As they kept on walking and talking, a fiery chariot with fiery horses suddenly appeared and separated one from the other. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind.
Hey, wow. So that's pretty dramatic. And verse 12, what happened?
Elijah saw it, and he cried out, "Oh, Father, Father, Israel's chariots and horsemen." When he could no longer see him, he grasped his garments and rent them in two.
So even though there's no mention that he died, for Elisha, Elijah had died. So he does the first
He knew he wasn't
is one does kriya, right? One tears his clothing. And then what did he do? This is like, again, a very interesting folk tale in a way. What happened?
You have to lower it a little bit.
Hold on a second. Yes. Verse 13.
He picked up Elijah's mantle, which had dropped from him, and he went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan.
14.
Taking the mantle which had dropped from Elijah, he struck the water and said, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" As he too struck the water, it parted to the right and to the left, and Elisha crossed over.
Okay, so what does this show? That he did get the powers of Elijah. And then let's move on a little bit.
When the disciples of the prophets at Jericho saw him from a distance, they exclaimed, "The spirit of Elijah has settled on Elisha." And they went to meet him and bowed low before him to the ground.
And then they said to him,
"Your servants have 50 able men with them. Let them go and look for your master. Perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has carried him off and cast him upon some mountain or into some valley."
Okay.
"Do not send them," he replied.
But they kept what?
But they kept pressing him for a long time until he said, "Send them." So they sent out 50 men who searched for 3 days but did not find him.
Then they came back and what?
They came back to him while he was still in Jericho, and he said to them, "I told you not to go."
Okay, and then?
The men of the town said to Elisha, "Look, the town is a pleasant place to live in, as my Lord can see, but the water is bad and the land causes bereavement."
And what did he say?
"Bring me a new dish and put salt in it." They brought it to him.
Then?
He went to the spring and threw salt into it. And he said, "Thus said the Lord, I heal this water. No longer shall death and bereavement come from it."
And then what is remarkable?
The water has remained wholesome to this day in accordance with the word spoken by Elisha.
Okay, now we just have a little story, and then we'll move on to something else. Okay, next morning. No, excuse me. One second. Okay.
Oh, here.
Okay.
What? Wait.
From
10
there.
in the morning. No, you passed it.
Yes, I did. Hold on. Okay, taking the mantle. He sends them out to look for him. Send them. Okay. Told you not to go. The water's bad. Make the water good. Okay. Now,
From there.
23.
23. From there, he went to Bethel. As he was going up the road, some little boys came out from the town and jeered at him, saying, "Go away, bald head. Go away, bald head."
So we learned something about Elisha. He was bald. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Usually we don't get these kind of characteristics, but this is
Yeah.
sort of a comic.
But he's also hairy.
In a very, one guy's very hairy and one guy's bald. So it's
Oh my God.
yeah, we learned a lot in the tutorial.
And these nasty little urchins don't seem.
Well, you'll see what happens.
Oh my
He turned
God.
around and what he said?
John said.
Verse 24.
He turned around and looked at them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. Thereupon 2 she-bears came out of the woods and mangled 42 of the children.
Wow.
Well, you don't mess around with him, I guess.
Vengeance. Wow.
Well, first of all, how did we know the 42? It sounds a little bit
Yeah, it's a
exaggerated.
little nuts.
And by the way, you don't need 2 bears to do that, but I guess it helps. Right? And then verse 25.
He went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria.
Okay, let's not get into Elisha, but there's a lot about Elisha. He has a lot of very interesting things to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have read about pretty much where he is, what do you call it? Most well known is from these stories in the book of Kings. And I'm going to just give you one line from another book. From, right?
Malachi, I never read.
Malachi is the last of the prophets.
Mm.
Okay, in the Hebrew arrangement of the Bible,
Right, it's
not the
about-
Christian arrangement. Okay, so this you may have heard of, but let's see what happens. Malachi is a very short.
It's about one chapter or
I
something.
think it's in one chapter. Let's see.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, and this is what we read on the Shabbat before Pesach, for Shabbat Hagadol.
Mhm.
Okay, be mindful. If you look at page verse 22,
Oh, here
Zichru
it
Torat
is.
Moshe Avdi Asher Tziviti Oto B'Chorev Al Kol Yisrael Chukim Mishpatim. Be mindful of the teaching of my servant Moses, whom I charged at Chorev with laws and rules. Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord. Bo Yom Adonai Hagadol v'Hanorah. That's why it's called Shabbat Hagadol.
Oh
And what
my.
is going to have happen? V'Heshiv Lev Avot al Banim, Lev Banim al Avotam, Pen Avo v'Hiketi et Haaretz Cherem.
What does
He
that
shall
mean?
do what? He shall reconcile. He shall reconcile parents
when-
with children, and the children. I'm just trying to get down a little bit. 1 second. Whoops! Come on, technology. I love you so.
Oh, there it is.
There it is.
He shall reconcile parents with children and children with their parents, so that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. That's how it ends. All of the prophets. However, they didn't want it to end with a downer. So it is our custom to add this sentence to it, which is the sentence we read earlier. Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord.
Yom Adonai Hagadol.
You don't get this from any of the texts that we read about Elijah in Kings. Kings 1 and Kings 2.
Huh.
Here, Malachi, by the time Malachi is around, it's already a number of years, maybe centuries, perhaps, even after Elijah. Elijah gets put into a new role, and he is seen as the harbinger of the day of judgment. The word Mashiach is never used.
Right.
Okay? But there is going to be this day of judgment, Yom Hadid, right? And this is really where, and it is possible to avoid the evil judgment. Okay? Remember, the prophet doesn't want his prophecy always to come true. He wants his prophecy not to come true because he doesn't want to see utter destruction. So what is the, at least according to this line or two, what is it that will save us from utter destruction?
Elijah.
Well, no, but what is Elijah's?
The children coming together with their parents and the parents with their children.
Right. How is that possible?
What?
I mean, this is a really tall order, right? There is in all reality throughout time some sort of generation gap, right, between the parents and children, and but he says that's the only way. So my take on this, and this is only my take on it, is this is why it's read before Pesach. So we'll get to later on why Elijah comes to the Seder. But my interpretation of why Elijah comes to the Seder is not based upon what we'll talk about, whether you need 4 cups or 5 cups, et cetera, which is why we do have a 5th cup on the table. But it's because what we are hoping that Elijah hears when he comes to your Seder table is that the hearts of the children and the hearts of the parents are brought together.
Yeah.
Meaning that's what the Seder's the objective of the Seder is. Somehow have one generation speak to the next generation and have the next generation be able to say, I hear you, right? Instead of, the boomers and the millennials going at each other, that kind of stuff, right? This is what Elijah's real role is at the Seder. Am I hearing good, important conversation? And not only about at that time of the year, it's usually the beginning of baseball season, right? Am I hearing more than just the discussion of how the Red Sox will do? Because ultimately at the Seder, it is an opportunity when we talk about oppression and we talk about freedom. Individuals have the capacity, if they have the will. You have to have the will. Capacity is one thing. If they have the will, to tell their children and their grandchildren that, you know what, everyone has gone through oppression, but everyone strives to be free. Everybody goes through a Mitzrayim in their lives. There isn't anybody, I'll speak for myself, I don't know, but there is no human being I have met that hasn't had some Mitzrayim in their life. Some narrow place, right, that they got stuck in. And if you could tell the next generation, you know what? There's light at the end of the tunnel. You get through it. You get through it. You go through the Red Sea. You get through it. That's a tremendously important thing to pass on to the next generation because they're going to have their own Mitzrayims. I know no one who gets out without it, right? So that's what my little drash is on why this is how the prophets end. They end by saying, you know what? There's no need for the world to be destroyed. Let's get it together. Let's get it together. As Reb Zalman say, let's get it together. Right? So it's a very poignant message. But here, all of a sudden, he's cast into a whole new light. Elijah is the harbinger of the day of judgment. And he will then become, of course, associated as the harbinger of the Messiah. And he will play a very important role, as we will see in the two weeks to come, both in the Talmud and in folklore. Talmud and Kabbalah and the folklore. Just a little preface to what we're going to be discussing. Elijah is given a very remarkably, and this is only one of the many roles he has, but there is in the Talmud, when there is a discussion, and there are many discussions, obviously, where they cannot come to any kind of decision, right? They say teku. And in modern Hebrew, when there's a soccer game with a tie score, it's called teku. Okay, just to show you how it's used. So what does teku mean?
Elijah will explain.
So teku means tishbi yavo yitaretz, tishbi yitaretz kushiyot ubayot.
Kushiyot ubayot.
Right? Tishbi, who?
Elijah,
right? He's from Tishbi. Elijah will come and he will answer all of these issues that we have. So there's another level that's given to Elijah in the Talmud as someone who comes and basically helps you find out what the answer is when you're stuck. And that will lead into the motif of Elijah becoming, if you will, almost an angelic character who reveals himself to various people all through the Talmud. It's called Gilui Eliyahu.
I didn't know that.
Revelation of Elijah. And special people have the capacity to get this message from him. So he becomes sort of a rather, interesting archetype of someone who's not physically there. There is, in the Talmud, there doesn't talk about a person or a corporeal Elijah, but there is this Elijah who has never died, whose voice is still heard, who is still there to give you wisdom, as a great wisdom giver, right? He could, and that's why I talk about that we need to perhaps talk about Elijah nature, the way Buddhists talk about Buddha nature. All of us have Elijah nature. All of us have the capacity to still be there to help others, the way Buddha decided not to stay in his state of enlightenment and come back and help others to get there. He will also play another interesting role, which we'll talk about, which is that Elijah will become a manifestation of someone who tests you, who tests your moral integrity. Elijah becomes someone who is always there to see how you truly behave in a magnanimous or a non-magnanimous way. And that's why when we get to the folk tales, and I wish there was a way of me giving you all the folk tales to read, but I've been looking at anything online to see if they have, so maybe you can help me look up Elijah folk. I have many books that are, like this is one of the really wonderful book. Anybody can see it? If you can find my picture, I'll get rid of this sharing now. Okay, it's called The Tales of Elijah the Prophet. There are a number of books like this. This book I think is out of print, but it's really a wonderful book, and it's filled with wonderful stories. I mentioned to a few people that I'm now telling Elijah stories to my grandchild who doesn't understand anything yet, but it doesn't matter. It gives me good practice, etc. So I don't know if I can find many to give you, but do anybody have this at home by any chance? It's by Penina Schramm. No. Penina Schramm, great storyteller. No, whatever. So I'm looking. If you can find some, that would be great. If you can look up and find some Elijah tales for our fourth session. Next session, we're going to do Talmud and Kabbalah. And one of the nice things about Elijah is, as I will do at the end, is that we'll try to explain why he shows up at every bris or brit, why he shows up every Motzei Shabbat. Eliyahu, right? Why Eliyahu? Right? We have so many other. Why doesn't Moses come? Right? Big question about the bris is why doesn't Abraham come? First one to have the brit, right? You expect Abraham, right? Or at a Seder, why is it Elijah and not someone from the other story? So that's where we're heading, and hopefully we'll get there. But as I say, if you could help me out and find some, either at your home or somewhere, look at your bookshelves, some stories of Elijah you'd like to share, we will share Elijah stories. Yes.
Do you think it's partly because he never really left? That he's
That's right.
always come back? Because he didn't really
Right. He didn't really leave, right? He didn't really leave, which is one of the which makes him totally unique in the entire Hebrew Bible, the entire Tanakh. There's only one other character named Enoch, from the book of Genesis, that doesn't seem to die, and he becomes an important figure, Enoch, as well. Especially in the intertestamental period. There's a period called the intertestamental period after the canonization of the Tanakh and the beginning of the early Christian writings, the patristic writings and others. There's a period of time where there are a lot of apocryphal books and all other kinds of books that appear, and many of them are about the ascension of Enoch, a lot of Enoch books. And it's very much that Enoch gets a lot of press, but then Elijah really becomes the main character, etc. Any other questions? We have 2 minutes. Any questions, comments?
So
Yes,
Elisha, what about Elisha? Does he?
There's a lot to read about him. I tell you the truth. Right? I'd like you to, if you have the time, go back to Sepharia, right, .org, and click on Tanakh and click on Kings. 2 Kings chapter 2, and you'll get 2 to 5. You get 3 or 4 chapters on Elisha. Very interesting guy, and bald. We now know he's bald, so I didn't. I had forgotten he was bald.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. No, nothing wrong with that.
That's what you say.
Right. I guess it just made him a little nasty, I must say.
Yeah, but I had a question about Elisha. So Elisha takes on the power of Elijah.
Right.
And Elijah kind of took on the power of Moses. I mean, he divided the. And now you have his disciple. Right. I mean,
it is an interesting thing about how Elijah's biography, a little we have of it, has this great Moses theme in it. You know, it is not expected. I don't know why.
But you also, when you think that Moses supposedly was punished because he struck a rock, without.
That's just a rationalization.
Of course, but here you've got Elijah. He just wants to get across this little, probably passable portion of Jordan, the Jordan River. So he divides it, boom, and then Elisha says,
dry land, right?
And then Elisha says, "Well, if you can do it, I can do it." So it's almost like both of them should have not been allowed to go to Canaan because they were, kind of playing godlike, in a sense.
I don't know. All I'm saying is for instance, Moses is never mentioned, right? Right at all. It's not.
But
mentioned.
it's all the references.
But the motifs of
he goes to Horeb and
right. It is. That's why the story is very unique. It's a very unique story, and the character of Elijah in the text we have read, he's not a very what's the best word to say? He's zealot. In the best and worst ways of understanding that word.
Right.
I think it was is Bobby and Bennett still here? Bennett Simon? No, Bennett was here last time. He sent me a note after saying, it's interesting that he's such a zealot, and yet he's given all of these kinds of abilities. And I say, yeah, because ultimately zealotry is sometimes rewarded, and the reward is that he is basically taken up into heaven without dying. Now, maybe as an antidote to that zealotry, Elijah is transformed in Jewish folktales as someone who's not a zealot for God as much as he is for the people. Because all the stories in the folktales of Elijah, both in the Sephardic world and Ashkenazi world, all has Elijah helping out those in need, or showing the hypocrisy that people have, etc., etc. That seems to be the new Elijah that begins to emerge. We're talking about a long time ago, about 1,000 years ago. This Elijah stories begin again and again and again. So he's an interesting character, but again, you are permitted to go back and read more, certainly about his disciple. And we will continue on. I'll bring in some stuff next week from the Talmud and then from the Kabbalah. And if you have anything that you have found about Elijah that you'd like to share with us, please do. I mean, I'm not. I spend a lot of hours looking for stuff, and I sometimes luck out and sometimes don't. Now, he's been taken up a lot into Christianity as well. Remember Elijah, and he's taken up into Islam. Right, as many characters from the Hebrew Bible are taken over. So John the Baptist is seen as Elijah because he's the harbinger of the Messiah, etc. So he will often be seen in that way. And in Islam, he's certainly just accepted as one of the prophets. The Quran allows a lot of prophets, but it only allows one final one.
There's a Zoom meeting going on.
What?
Alan's not attending. Let me see if I can find some light. There you go. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Oh, what's good?
Is this another Zoom meeting going on now?
Alan, something's going on and he should mute himself.
Alan, mute yourself.
Alan.
All right. So I thank you. It's so great. I'm telling you, it's nice to see everybody's face.
Thank you.
We should spend a minute or two just looking at faces.
It's true.
It's good. No, it's fun. It's fun. I'm glad we did some text. Usually, it's me talking all the time, which is okay. But
no,
I get bored with my talking.
We don't.
We don't at all.
Let's just also to spend a minute or two on. I know Ken asked me to send something out about Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who passed away rather suddenly. It got sort of lost in all of this election stuff. But I've had I mentioned to a few people, I've had the opportunity over my many years to have met him a number of times in smaller, occasions, and he's always been a very hospitable person. He really exemplified a lot of the characteristics that we would hope we would find in our leadership. Right here was a man who was, first of all, very traditionally.
Alan's looking into that.
Alan, Kim, mute yourself.
Are you?
Alan and Kim, mute yourself.
Can't you mute him?
I can, maybe I can. I'll try. Yeah, I can mute him.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. I muted him. Did I mute everybody? No. Jonathan Sachs was an Orthodox Jew. He may have been an Orthodox Jew, but it certainly was Orthodox. You know the difference, right? The difference, Orthodox and Orthodox.
No.
Orthodox is having one way of thinking.
Oh yeah, he's not like that.
Right.
No.
But Orthodox is one way of practicing. Right. So I know many Orthodox Jews who are not Orthodox. If you asked them to sign a statement, affidavit, I believe every word of the Torah was given to Moshe, at Sinai, verbatim. Many of these Jews would not sign that, but they would live a Orthodox life. And you ask him why, he says, well, because it's not really a matter of orthodoxy for me. It's a matter of how to live one's life. And this is the way I want to live my life. And there's a lot of rewards in that kind of life. I'd be very honest. When I left orthopraxy or orthodoxy, I lost a lot in a way. It was a really vibrant, beautiful kind of community. But on the women's issue, I had an issue, and that was what broke it pretty much for me back in 1974 when I sort of left that scene. But still very traditional. I stopped most of the things you shouldn't do. I don't steal or murder anymore, and a few stuff like that. So I've kept on the right path. But so Jonathan Sachs also had this capacity. He was first of all, he dressed beautifully. He had this fantastic British accent. He was so well educated about everything. And he had no problem of bringing in whatever he could into Torah and bringing Torah into everything. That's a great skill. That's a great skill. And if you read his books, which are very readable, he was a synthesizer. I don't think he was an original thinker, but he was a great synthesizer, a great person who could explain things to people. And that's a great skill. He was working before he passed on a new Hertz, quote unquote, a new Hertz Chumash, a new version of a weekly Chumash. He was to do his own translation of it and the commentaries. They may continue on it by taking his Divrei Torah, which he does every week. You know, if you go to Jonathan Sacks, you can hear him. And thank God for these things. We hope to hear him for years and years and years to come. You know, etc. He also, which people may not know, he was a Chabadnik in his own way. He was very much influenced by Chabad. And that might explain his openness to just being with people. The last few years since he retired about 7 years ago. It's such a shame because he's a little close to my age, so I say he's a young person. How could he die? Right? He was 72 years old. He was young by many standards. So for the last number of years, he got involved with the Kennedy School at Harvard, and was very interested in issues of leadership. And he spent a whole year writing Divrei Torah that had to do with leadership models. It was one of his real strong points of being able to deal with that. And of course, he tried very hard to find the fact that you can be a pluralist. I remember I met him right after he retired, and I said to him, you know, I really am so happy for you that you retired so you can really speak your mind. Because when he was chief rabbi, there was always groups of people watching him all the time. Make sure you say the right thing, you know, make sure you don't sound like you're, etc. So he said, yes, it's going to be a little bit easier. And he asked me who I was, etc. And I was very glad he knew about the Big Book of Jewish Humor. So, you know, it was nice. It was nice that we had a nice comment. But he just really was, it is a great loss. We lost Adi Steinsaltz this year as well. Another great scholar who opened up the Talmud for all of us in a way. So you know, we should always appreciate the fact that we have these wonderful teachers, and we shouldn't take them for granted. And they have contributed so much to us. Yes, Lily?
Rabbi Sacks continue for this year. They're going to publish he wrote ahead for the year's commentaries for this.
Good.
Every week there'll be something still published.
Right. And I think he said he wanted to translate it himself again, because he was not satisfied, as a few of us are, with the translations that we have. But now everybody's very excited about the Robert Alter translation, which I have not studied. But to be honest, I think anything is better than the JPS that we have right now, you know, etc. So I just wanted to mention him, you know, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. The memory of a righteous person should be a blessing for us all. And I know how much he impacted on me and on many other people. He will be missed. And this is all we could do in our lives, my friends. This is all we could do, my friends, is take what you've gotten that has been valuable to you and pass it on. That's all you can do. Your teachers are not expecting to be repaid. The way you pay them back is by pushing it forward. That's right. I started Nishmat Chaim. Why? Because of my teacher. I said, you know, there's no way I'm going to give back to her all that she gave to me, but I can continue the work. And that's what our job is to continue the work, etc. Now, Shana has a friend here. Take a look.
What? Oh.
Some people have Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder. And she has, what's the name of our friend?
Canela. That means cinnamon in Spanish. Canela.
Canela.
Means cinnamon?
In Spanish, it's cinnamon.
Canela, yeah.
And does Canela talk?
She speaks to her own kind.
And is it a certain kind of bird? Special?
She's a cockatiel.
A cockatiel is a little cockatoo. Or no?
A cockatiel is an item in itself.
Oh, it's not a cockatoo or a cockathree or cockatoo.
No,
Okay, just checking. I know nothing about it.
it's okay.
But if any of you have pets you'd like to bring on board next time, it's okay.
Moshe, it's such a joy to be back with you, always with you, and with everybody here that I know. From
Yeah,
my,
it's fun.
it's just a real
This is the
blessing.
real thing. We will be continuing the Zoom stuff, I think, for years to come.
I know, but it's
really.
just a pleasure to be this way with people. When I was on this cousin Zoom yesterday, several of them complained about not seeing people doing Zoom. And my feeling was, oh, there's so many wonderful things that I'm getting because of Zoom. I get to see you. And, so I'm very grateful to have you and all these people who I
It's
know.
been very effective for us, very effective. Some of you go to Boker Tov, I know, every morning. I know how important that's been for people, and certainly for the teaching on a cold night like tonight. I wouldn't want you to have to get out of your house and put on a heavy coat and drive and find parking. So there are advantages here. Yeah.
There's Torah study tomorrow.
Betsy, there is Torah study on Wednesday.
Exactly. Isn't today? What day?
It's Monday.
Monday.
It's Monday.
Monday. Okay.
I sometimes forget what month, what year, whatever we are.
Yeah. So there is Torah study Wednesday.
Like I'm still signing my checks 57880.
Very well.
It takes a while, right, to get there.
It's true.
But one of the nice things is that I tried to have a schmooze Zoom. Remember at the beginning, and I don't know if it was the time or whatever, but it was great. I mean, it was fun, but it was sort of petering out, and people, so it doesn't always have to be around an academic theme. But I think I will soon post what the next classes will be. So I'm open for your suggestions. Because I came up with Elijah because
That's wonderful. This is fabulous.
This is very good.
This was wonderful. Moshe. Teach a course about Elijah. But if you have an idea about something, or if you would like to just bring a text in that we should share and do together, we have to give us some excuse to got to put a list in.
Have you seen the new Rabbi Sachs book, the morality book?
Not
yes,
yet.
I've read it. I'm reading it now. I mean, it's really
I just
good.
bought it. Is it good?
It's really good. I love the way he writes. It's fantastic.
Yeah, he writes very accessibly.
Yeah.
Another book, Not in My Name, was a very important book. So that was the one before, I think, about not using God as a vehicle for violence against each other.
Oh.
Remember, that's what he spoke of when we had the small group meeting. He spoke about that book, and he said, everybody looks at the beginning of these stories in the Bible of rivalry, as we'll read this coming Shabbat, is Toldot, Isaac and Esau, right, and all of that, sibling rivalry, and then we'll read later about Joseph and all that. And he says, and we had Isaac and Ishmael and Esau and Jacob. He says, everybody reads the beginning of the stories, but they don't read the end of the stories. And if invariably, in all of those stories, there's reconciliation.
Oh.
I'm not saying they that Isaac and Ishmael became buddies, but they did come to live alongside each other, not together. And they both came to bury their father, and and there was a respect. And Isaac and Jacob and Esau, look what happens there, right? There's a reconciliation. So he says we don't read the stories because we're using the stories for our own political motives. We want to say it's inscribed in our very DNA that we should hate each other. It's inscribed in the very, now, of course, there are evolutionary biologists who would say the same thing, right? It's really in our DNA to not live together, but be us and them, and protection or so. I don't buy it. I don't buy it, because we also have throughout history efforts of people to work communally together. Yeah. Not always successfully, but certainly efforts in that direction. Yeah, Yanko. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that Jonathan Sachs wrote is the introduction to the Siddur he edited. It's about 40 pages of an explication of Jewish prayer, which is brilliant. It's published by Koren.
Koren, right?
And
They're the
it's a
one doing the
lovely
Bible too.
secure. They have the right left takes a little while to get
That's
used
the way
to.
you should be. If you look at our Machzor, Reb Zalman taught me this. He said, when your eye goes to a book, it goes to the middle of the book. Okay? English goes this way. It should always be on that side of the page.
Right.
Hebrew always goes this way.
Anyway,
And we usually have it the other way around. So it's coming into the middle rather than expanding out. So Koren did a very nice job with that.
Yeah, no, and the font is beautiful.
And the Koren font is a famous
The
font.
introduction is brilliant, and the commentary on each page is really very good. A thought for at least one class would be the music, the songs, the lyrics of Leonard Cohen. And I'd like to hear you do that, Moshe.
Well, he was known first as a poet.
Yeah.
In Canada, he wrote. Got to find. I have a collection somewhere of his early poetry. But yeah, I would just look. I wouldn't mind just sitting with you guys and we just put on a Leonard Cohen album and just go for it. Everybody get a drink and or a drink or a refreshment of your choice. It is now legal in Massachusetts.
I think we don't read enough of the prophets. I really like.
Right. We only read most of Isaiah. Right, mostly
the prophets.
All right, readings of the prophets. I'll think about that. Some of them are cumbersome.
I used to love them when I was.
Like which one? What did you like? I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, I like the stories. I love the stories of Saul and David and.
Yeah, we once did a course.
That's a good one, but also
reading all of the David in the book of Samuel and the book of King, all of them.
Yeah,
it's straight without commentary. And as I mentioned, perhaps at the beginning of this last week, is that it is Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I mean, I like stories.
It's a lot of violence. I must say, a lot of palace intrigue. Incest, rape, whatever you like, it's in there. It's good. So yeah, it's a good story.
Shelf Team, whatever they.
Joshua, I wouldn't. There's a lot of that. That's too much violence in there.
There's a lot of violence in the
lot of violence. It's sad in a way that we have so much of that in there.
Isaiah.
Ponderous. To be honest, we read a lot of Isaiah though. Most of the Haftarot we use on Shabbat. You see the majority are from Isaiah.
Yeah.
Why? Because Isaiah is 70 chapters long.
Well, I think it would be interesting to do those prophets that are used in Haftarot, because that would be for me an interesting matching up that I would learn something from.
All right, now does everybody? I don't know how we're going to do this from a point. If you have your Eitz Chaim Chumash, anybody have one at home?
Yeah,
somewhere.
Okay. Yes. The gentleman who did the commentaries on the Haftarah, Michael Fishbane.
Do I have?
He's a brilliant Bible scholar, Michael Fishbane, but Buzzy Fishbane from the old days. So Michael Fishbane, if you look at every time there's a Haftarah, he does a fantastic commentary, and he gives you the reason that the Haftarah is attached to the parsha.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So that would give you all that information. He gives you when the book was written, etc. What the etc. So there is a lot out there to do. And he's actually there is actually a whole book of Haftarot only with his introductions.
Well,
take it out.
Can you say the person's name again?
If you look at our Chumash that we use in Shul.
Yeah.
Okay. His name is Michael Fishbane, Fishbane. He's a Brookline boy, and he does a very good job of doing that, of everything that you asked. Why is it connected to this parsha, etc. And what does it come into? So I'll think about it. You think about it. We still have a couple of weeks, and I won't start it probably till after Thanksgiving anyway, maybe in December.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to Florida these days? No.
What?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, no, we have Leslie and Ben are having a baby within a week or two, so it will not
really?
be the baby.
Oh, that's
Also,
baby too.
COVID down there.
Yeah, true. Two.
Baby number two. Right.
Yeah.
Good. Have they given the first one a name yet? The first one had get a name yet?
Ari?
Yeah, Ari.
Ari has a name.
Because usually I used to watch the Charlie Chan movies. It was always number one, number two, number three.
Yes, no. The number two does not have a name. I don't know what the number two will be yet.
Oh, they haven't
Number
said.
one.
Oh, good. They're
Yeah.
old fashioned. They want to see what the baby is.
Yes.
That's good. That's nice. So, chutz mizeh, aside from that, everybody's well.
Yeah.
Physically well.
Oh,
Okay. 'Cause
yeah.
I'm getting mentally frazzled totally by this.
Yeah, this.
Showing Ganug, I'm ready. But we got
Mm.
another 7 to 10 months, unfortunately.
I don't think
And
so.
we have this strange good thing
Oh,
going on in Washington. I try to avoid, but it's getting weirder and weirder every day.
No, there's going to be a vaccine. It won't be 7 to 10 months.
What?
The vaccine will not help if no one else is doing what you have to do of wearing a mask and social distancing.
Oh, yeah.
Then you'll know in a year whether the vaccine was effective. But now it's already rising to such a level because of the politicization of this stupid thing. That we are going to see the effects of this of a couple of 100,000 people dying, no matter with the vaccine or not. So it's a crime. It's a crime.
A nurse in North Dakota said that a man was dying. Several people she knew that she was patients of hers were dying. And she said, do you want to talk on FaceTime with your family? And they said, no, it's not going to happen. It's a hoax. 5 minutes later, they were dead.
It was a hoax. It was a hoax. They were taken up to heaven by fiery chariots.
But I mean, somebody who has it and is dying and doesn't and still says it's a hoax.
No. That's it, folks.
All right. On that note.
Thank you.
What did P.T. Barnum say? Right? And we got a lot of them out there.
I'm afraid so.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Be well.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Thank you.
See you next week. Same time, same station.
Yeah. Shavua tov. Bye.
Bye.
Thank